Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another one of our webinars. So, over the last fortnight, we've gone over the 6 parts of this tapping in webinar, talking about all the realities and advantages of the market segment of people with disability, ranging from employment to why access and inclusion is worth investing in, and then a closer look at accessible tourism and events. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this last week. We're going to start again from the beginning today. So today we're doing tapping part 1 of 6. Okay, why employ people with impairment? "30-Foot Drop acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to them and their cultures, and to elders both past and present. You must always remember that under the asphalt and concrete, this land is, was and always will be traditional Aboriginal land. We would also like to acknowledge the Department of Communities Disability Services for funding this and many other initiatives like it. Without their support, so many projects such as Two Wise Monkeys and the Tapping In projects would never actually see the light of day, and as a community we would be much poorer for it. So this workshop is part of the Realities and Advantages of Access and Inclusion grant awarded to 30-Foot Drop as part of the Information Linkages and Capacity Building grants of 2018 to 2019. Quick bit of housekeeping. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to monitor all of our live streams at once. Okay? So as a result, we ask that if you have any questions or want to interact with us at all, please head to www.30footdrop.com.au/live. Okay, and you'll find there a chat box and a question box. Please enter any of those there. Okay. If you put any on social media or any of our other channels, we will answer them. It will just take a little bit longer to get to them. So you won't get that immediate feedback, which is the whole point of running a live webinar. So once again, please head to www.30footdrop.com.au/live. Now, we will be covering a lot of information in a short amount of time today. So we really encourage people to minimize distractions where possible. Okay? Now, if you really enjoy today, okay, please jump onto social media, give us a rating, a review, follow us, subscribe. All of these things really, really help to grow us as a brand. Okay, really important to do that, so please jump on there. We've got so much good stuff happening. Jump on there and, yeah, give us a go. Now, we'll also be recording this session and posting it. So if you want to review it, we'll be putting it on the 30-Foot Drop Vimeo library and our YouTube channel as well. Also today, we will be referencing research that we've actually used and quoting statistics from this research. Anything that we reference today will be found on our digital resource library. So if you head to www.30footdrop.com.au, go to Solutions and then to Resources, and you'll find everything there. There's a lot of useful information, much more than what we're going to be covering today, and a lot of really helpful stuff. So please, I encourage you to go and have a look. Also, at the end of the webinar, we've got a short survey for attendees to complete. So please take the time to fill this in, as it really, really helps us out. Okay, allow me to quickly introduce myself. I am your Wise Monkey for today. I'm Ben Aldrich. I am the Managing Director of 30-Foot Drop. And this series of webinars is my baby. So I am See No Evil. Okay. I am See No Evil because I have a visible impairment. Okay, I'm a C5 quadriplegic. It is very, very obvious that I have an impairment because it's very, very hard to hide wheels that you need to get around on. Now, the reason that I am See No Evil is that by the end of this session today, you'll leave here seeing no evil about impairment. My co-presenter Lisa, who does the webinars as well, she is Hear No Evil. Okay, I won't ruin her story because it's an amazing story, but she is Hear No Evil. She has an invisible impairment. And you wouldn't know about the impairment unless she tells you about it, which is why she is Hear No Evil. But wait, isn't there normally 3 monkeys? The 3 wise monkeys. So you've got see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Who's going to be the 3rd monkey? It's going to be you guys. Okay? Hopefully by the end of the day, you will speak no evil about impairment. Okay, let's have a look at our outline and method for today. What are we going to cover and how are we going to do it? So look, there is a lot to learn about people with impairment and the opportunities they represent to you as employees. Okay, so first up, we're going to examine and bust some common myths around employing someone with an impairment. From there, we're going to get down to brass tacks and actually look at the subsidies available when employing someone with an impairment and how you can access them. The final subject that we're going to look at is workplace modifications and how to access funding for these. After we've covered these 3 subjects, we're going to have a bit of an open forum session where you can ask any questions. Okay, so how are we going to do this? What is our teaching method? Our teaching method is open, honest conversation mixed in with fun and experience. Okay? When I say open, honest conversations, I mean it. You can ask anything. 30-foot drop, okay, our aim is to educate the community through open, honest conversations. So the questions don't have to be about what we've covered today. If you're curious about any aspects of my life, my injury, etc., please feel free to ask them. I will answer anything. Now, you'll notice that there is very little written content on my slides as we go through. That's because you're here to interact with me, okay? Now, in order to facilitate this, I really, once again, encourage you guys to head across to www.30footdrop.com.au/live so that you can use the chat function there. Okay, last of the pre-workshop information that I like to get through, and this is the terminology review. So, to reduce confusion and ensure understanding, I want to review some terminology that I'll be using in this session. Okay, the first up is the difference between disability and impairment. An impairment is an injury, illness, or congenital condition that causes or is likely to cause a loss or difference of physiological or psychological function. Okay? To put it simply, an impairment is your medical diagnosis. Now, the reason that I like to talk about the difference between disability and impairment is because disability is actually being used wrong. Okay? A lot of people think that when you talk about a person with a disability, okay, it's actually supposed to be a person with impairment. Okay? The impairment is our medical diagnosis. So, for example, I'm a C5 quadriplegic with post-traumatic stress in remission. That is my impairment. So if we've been getting disability wrong, then what is it? Okay? Well, a disability is a loss or limitation of opportunities to take part in society on an equal level with others due to social and environmental barriers. Okay? So where your impairment is your medical diagnosis, your disability is, as the word implies, if you actually stop and think about the word disability, okay, it is something that makes you unable or disables you from being able to access or participate in an activity. Okay? The disability is the barrier. Okay? It is something that disables you. Your impairment is your medical diagnosis. So you'll hear me refer to people with impairment. Hopefully that's made sense to everybody. If not, please chuck the questions in the chat box. The next thing that we're going to look at is the difference between access and inclusion. Now, unfortunately, a lot of businesses, a lot of people think of access and inclusion as one homogeneous lump, okay? But it's not. They're actually two completely different things. And as a result, the full meaning of the word gets lost, okay? So first up is access. Access refers to the removal or reduction of barriers, both physical and attitudinal, to participation in the activities and functions of a community. At its core, Access focuses a lot on the physical world around us, and it's easily assessed by a checklist. As a result, that is what a lot of businesses tend to focus on, is access. Okay? And don't get me wrong, it's very, very important. Removing those barriers is so important, but the access without the next word, inclusion, okay, is only half of what a business needs. So inclusion itself, what is it? Okay, it's actually more of a psychological state of being. Okay, and it is the process where every person who wishes to can participate fully in all aspects of an activity or service in the same way as any other member of the community. Okay? Now, when I say every person, inclusion isn't just specific to impairment. Okay? Inclusion means every person. So this is irrespective of age, impairment, gender, religion, sexual preference, nationality, or faith. Okay? So access is being able to actually get into and use the service. Inclusion is knowing that your contributions are valued, that you are going to be treated with the same respect and dignity as anybody else. So that's the difference between access and inclusion. Once again, if you have any questions about any of these, if something doesn't make sense, please head to www.30footdrop.com.au/live. Okay? From there, you'll find another live stream happening. Okay? Same version of what's happening exactly now. But there's also a chat box there, and I'll be able to answer any of your questions. But now, let's get on with the webinar and have a look at the myths and realities of employing people with impairment. Now, these myths that I'm about to go through, there's 7 of them, okay? They're not just random statements that have been plucked out of the ether, okay? These are actually 7 reoccurring reasons for not employing people with impairment from studies all over the world, okay? From everywhere. Okay, so these are all being found through research. Okay, and these are coming from research such as the employer's attitudes towards person with a disability in the workforce, myths or realities. Research. This is going from 1999. All these different researchers all the way up to 2016. Okay, all really important to keep that in mind. So, although not all of these myths may apply to you, I reckon that some of them will. Okay, so let's start off with myth number 1, and that is that people with an impairment need expensive modifications in order to be a productive employee. Okay, so not true. Okay, that is the myth. The reality of it is that not everybody needs expensive modifications, because impairments are like people. Every single one of them is unique, and not everyone with an impairment needs modifications. Okay? My advice is to ask any potential employees to find out what modifications they require. Now, I readily admit that getting adaptations for impairments is expensive, okay? Wheelchairs can easily cost $20,000, and having a car modified can cost upwards of $150,000, okay? But the thing is that most of the time, somebody with impairment already has these things and don't need any more. That's because we already have them in day-to-day use, okay? I already have my wheelchair. An employer doesn't need to get me it. I already have a car modified so that I can get to and from work. The employer doesn't need to pay for that. Okay? And if an employee with an impairment does need... go back to it being in day-to-day use. Okay? This little baby here. Okay? It looks pretty gnarly. It's actually called a grabber. Now, this I use for picking up pieces of paper and other small objects off the ground. Now, the thing is that when I first started off in the workforce and had one of these, okay, the employer didn't have to get it for me because I already had it, okay? Because I use this in day-to-day life. I use this for everything from picking up my keys when I drop them to getting my son off the ground when he was young, okay? I already had this. The employer didn't need to do it. And you know what? Even if the employee with an impairment does need a modification, they are often easy and inexpensive modifications. Okay? There's a good chance that this isn't the first time that this barrier has been encountered by the employee. Okay? And that they'll probably know a workaround for it. So once again, talk to them. Okay? Ask them. Involve them. They will surprise you with their knowledge, and like I said, there's a very good chance it'll be cheap and inexpensive. Okay? And you know what? Even if it is expensive, then there is actually funding available, which we're going to cover later this session, okay, when we look at job access and workplace modifications. So, in conclusion, myth 1, okay, people with impairment do not need expensive modifications in order to be a productive employee. Okay? We are all different. Ask. Myth 2. People with impairment are frequently absent from work. Now, the reality of this is that it couldn't be further from the truth. And in fact, the opposite is true. Okay? According to the Disability Investment Group, The Way Forward, a new disability policy framework for Australia, 2009, 86% of employees with impairment have the same or superior attendance to other workers. Okay? That's amazing when you think about it. Okay? Now, on top of that, studies also show they have a reduced turnover rate. Okay? Reduced turnover means less onboarding costs, which means more profit. Okay? Now, why is this the case? Okay? Well, the unemployment rate for people is actually double that to the rest of society. Double. Okay? Let that sink in for a second. But more than just being double, okay? It will also take on average twice as many job applications before landing a job. With one friend of mine, okay, applying for 183 positions before landing a job. Now, when I say when she applied for 183 positions, she wasn't applying to be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist or some really niche specialised position. These were entry-level positions in the workforce. She had prior work experience, okay, and she had a great job history. And yet it still took her 183 applications. So the theory is that due to the difficulty of getting employment, people with impairment view it as a privilege and not a right, and we will go the extra mile for it. Okay? And I can say from a personal experience, this is true. Okay? So, in conclusion, myth 2, okay? People with impairment take fewer sick days, okay? Have the same or superior attendance compared to the rest of the workforce and have a reduced turnover rate. What an amazing employee, okay? Just from those stats. Myth 3, people with impairment are only suited to unskilled work. Okay? The reality of this is that it is massively untrue. There is such a range of skills, talents, and abilities. Okay? Lisa, my co-presenter that I mentioned earlier, okay, she runs her own photography business. She is absolutely amazing. Okay? Really, really talented at what she does. She has also worked in museums in really technical positions. Amazing. Okay? Now, let's have a look at some stats that support this, okay? The Australian Bureau of Statistics survey of working age people with impairment who are employed found that, okay, and this is the people who are employed, almost 20% of them work as professionals. Okay? Just over 14% of them work as clerical administrative workers. 15% work as technicians or trades. 11, or almost 12% of them run their own business. Okay? And about a third of them work from home. So, as you can see, there is a wide range of talents and abilities when it comes to people with impairment. And so you should never think of only employing them as unskilled workers, because you will be missing out on massively talented people who could make your business so much more than what it already is. All right, myth number 4. And I love this one. This one makes me laugh each time. I find it very hard to take this one seriously, okay? My workers' compensation premiums and work health and safety incidences will go up if I employ someone with an impairment. The reality is that is not true, okay? Employing someone with an impairment does not affect your premiums. Okay? Insurance underwriters look at your incidents history and workers' compensation and not the number of people with impairment employed when they're deciding your premiums. Okay? The number of incidences is what they look at, and the workers' compensation history. So, here's a nice little stat for you. Okay? Studies have shown that employees with impairment are up to 6 times less likely to have a work health and safety incident and are less likely to lodge a workers' compensation claim. Okay? These reduced rates will lower your business premiums insurance. Okay? So, if you ever thought that it would make your workers' compensation and safety incidence rates go up, think again. Okay? Now, it is theorised, once again, that the reason for this can be attributed to the difficulty that many people with impairment have in finding employment. Okay? When it's so hard to find employment, you're not going to risk your job by flaunting the rules and cutting corners. Okay? When you are grateful for that job, you are going to follow the rules. You are going to make sure that you don't give your employee any reason, or your employer any reason for firing you. All right, let's move on to myth number 5. People with impairment are less productive employees. Okay? The reality is that this is completely not true. Okay? Studies have shown that when matched in a job that is within their ability, people with impairment are as productive as other employees. Okay? Couple this with reduced absenteeism, reduced work health and safety and workers' compensation, and increased retention, suddenly employing people with impairment makes sense. Okay? And on top of that, if you actually stop and think about it, you are always employing somebody with the ability to be able to do the job that you're looking at. Okay? So, if that work is within the ability of that person, why does their impairment matter? By making their impairment matter when it is a job within their ability, you are disabling that person. Okay? Now, as a last point, okay, there are some impairments out there that actually significantly reduce their productivity. Now, in this case, you may want to consider the supported wage system. Okay? The supported wage system, under it, people with impairment can access a reliable process of productivity-based wage assessment to determine fair pay for fair work. Now, that'll be covered later in the session when we look at subsidies. Okay? It is out there. But like I said, as long as you match the position with the person with impairment, then they're going to be just as productive, if not more. Myth 6, okay? Workers with impairment will not fit into my workplace, okay? The reality of this is, once again, that it's not true, okay? Studies show that in most cases, co-worker acceptance comes with awareness and observing that workers are competent and efficient at their jobs, regardless of impairment. Okay, if you stop and think about it, when somebody new starts at your job, okay, your first concern, more often than not, is that they are going to be efficient and able to do their job and not create more work for you. It is the same when it comes to people with impairment. On top of that, as well, people with impairment make up to 20% of the Australian population, and the likelihood of clients and co-workers having a relative or friend with impairment is high. Okay, so that will also give them a point of commonality, I think is the word. And on top of that, as a last point with this particular myth, okay, studies show that employer initiatives in hiring people with impairment can have positive bottom line results, increased staff morale and community recognition as good corporate citizens. Okay, that last point, the good corporate citizens, that feeds into tomorrow's webinar when we look at ethical consumerism. Okay, so make sure you tune in tomorrow to have a listen to that one. But overall, workers with impairment, we fit into the workplace the same as anybody else. Okay? Myth number 7, the final one. If my worker with impairment does not work out, I cannot discipline them or fire them because they are different. Well, that is not true at all. Okay? Employing a person with impairment is the same as any other worker. Okay? A good rule is that when you bring an employee on board, is that you must establish clear performance expectations from the start. Okay? And like any other employee, if they are unable or unwilling to do the job, you can take further action as normal. On top of that, there are no special laws that prevent you from disciplining or terminating an employee who is unable or unwilling to do the job, impairment or not. Okay? So that's the 7 myths. If you have any questions about those myths, as I've been going through, please head to www.30footdrop.com.au/live and enter any questions into there, okay? And I will make sure that I answer them as I go. Okay, so hopefully those myths have actually given you a couple of light bulb moments in there, because the thing is that people with impairment make amazing employees. Okay, there are multiple studies that show that. On top of that, okay, there are also subsidies and workplace modifications that can make it a better financial choice for employing these particular people. Okay, so let's have a quick look at them. First of all, we've got the subsidies. Okay, so when employing a person with impairment, there are various opportunities for subsidies depending on their profile and the role hours, or the number of hours that they're going to be actually working. Okay, these subsidies, they're designed to offset training and other costs during the initial period, and they can be released in a lump sum or a flexible payment. Now, these subsidies, they are contingent on a few things. Okay, the first thing is that the award rate for the role is being paid. The second is that the minimum hours are being worked as per the agreement. Okay, now I'll cover, in order to access these subsidies, you have to go into an agreement with the next point. Okay, the employee has to be registered with a Disability Employment Service. Okay, these subsidies, you basically form an agreement with the Disability Employment Service on behalf of the government, okay, to employ this person for a minimum number of hours per week. Now, there are 4 basic options, and now what we're going to go through them. Now, these are the basic outlines, and some further criteria may apply. Okay, and in order to find out that criteria, I really encourage you guys to get a hold of your local disability employment service, but a bit more on that later. Okay, so the first subsidy is called, as it's very creatively known, the wage subsidy. Now, the amount for the wage subsidy is $1,500, okay? And the requirements for that is that the person with impairment has to be working at least 8 hours a week, okay? Now, when I talk about the roll hours, and actually I'll go back to here for a sec, okay? When I say minimum hours being worked as agreed, okay, the hours per week that are required is an average over the agreed time period, okay? So the wage subsidies typically are 3 or 6 months, okay? And when they tell you the minimum number of hours per week required, that is an average over that time period. So for example, if the agreed time period is 6 months, okay, then, and it's 8 hours a week over 6 months, then it will be the average over that 6 months. It needs to be 8 hours a week. So you could do 16 hours one week, none the next. 16 hours the next week, none the next. That way. Or if you are a very feast or famine type business, then it can still work for you as long as it averages out to be the amount equal to the requirement. So, as I said, the wage subsidy, the amount is $1,500, okay, and the requirements is at least 8 hours a week, averaged out over a minimum of a 13-week duration. But when the role starts, there has to be an intention of this job going to 26 weeks. Okay? So, but, okay, so this is the complicated part. So it has to be a duration of 13 weeks minimum, but the employee has to be, there has to be an expectation of it going to at least 26 weeks or 6 months. Now, if the job has to end at the 13-week point, you will still get your payment, okay? Because everybody, this is the government's way of saying, unfortunately, we know that stuff happens. Okay, so that's the wage subsidy. Let's move on to the next one. It's called Wage Start. Okay, now this one's getting slightly bigger. This is $6,000. Okay, and here are some of the requirements. So, first up, the employee has to be under the age of 50 years old. And they have to be classified as a longer-term unemployed job seeker. Okay, so what that means is that this job seeker has to have been in an active job search mode for at least 52 weeks or 1 year or longer. Okay, so it's for your longer-term unemployed job seekers. Okay, now they need to be working at least 15 hours per week, and the minimum duration for this particular subsidy is 26 weeks. Okay, as I said, 15 hours average, 15 hours per week average over that 26 weeks. Okay. And now, the third subsidy is called the Restart subsidy. Now, this is the big mother. This is the big mama. Okay, this is $10,000 subsidy, which is massive. When you think about onboarding costs for your business, $10,000 is amazing. Okay, hell, the $1,500 is amazing to help with onboarding. Okay, but $10,000 is huge. Now, the requirements for this is that, unlike the last one, where the employee had to be under 50, for the Restart subsidy, the employee has to be over the age of 50. Okay, once again, they need to be classed as a longer-term unemployed job seeker. Okay, so the active job search duration of 52 weeks or longer. They need to work at least 20 hours per week average over the 26-week duration. Okay, now those are the three simple or simpler wage subsidies that are available out there, and I think you'll all agree that they are absolutely amazing. As I said, help with onboarding costs is always gratefully received as a business owner. Okay, But now we're going to get on to the final wage subsidy that's available out there for people with impairment. And this is the supported wage system. Now, I hinted at it earlier when we were going through the myths, when we were talking about people with impairments and how they are just as productive when matched in a role that suits their ability. Okay? And I was talking about how if somebody's impairment means that they cannot perform to the required standard, that there are options. And this is the option. Okay? So the supported wage subsidy. So it's far more complicated, but in short, revolves around the concept of fair pay for fair work. Okay? It allows candidates who cannot perform all job requirements to receive a productivity-based wage and not disadvantage the employer financially. Now, this particular subsidy is it's assessed, okay, by an independent assessor, and this assessment determines the gap between actual and required or standard performance due to the worker's health condition or impairment, and the percentage of hourly rate payable. Okay, so it allows people with severe impairments to work without disadvantaging the employer financially. So an example of this would be, say for example, if it's determined that somebody is producing work to 70% of the required amount for that role, then the relevant award for that role is applicable, but only at 70% per hour. Okay, so it is an amazing system that will allow you to employ somebody with with quite a severe impairment, and not to disadvantage you financially. Now, the assessment itself, okay, is done by an independent assessor, and they are experts at what they do. They are very good at what they do. So I hope those subsidies have all made sense to you. But the next question, of course, is how can employers actually access these subsidies? Well, best way to do it is to contact your local disability employment service, okay, and get started today. Now, we will be covering disability employment service providers and their roles in the next webinar. So if you're curious about who they are and what they do and how they work, how they get funded, what services they offer, really encourage you guys to log on again tomorrow and watch that one. Okay. But for now, we are going to move on to looking at workplace modifications. Now, workplace modifications in Australia, they're all done through Job Access. Okay. Now, Job Access is the national hub for workplace and employment information for people with impairment, employers, and service providers. Okay, that's a quote directly taken from their website. They obviously use people with disability instead of impairment. It's a governmental thing. So, Job Access itself is funded by the Employment Assistance Fund, okay, and they offer financial assistance for workplace modifications that assist people with impairment to gain meaningful, lasting employment. Okay, they are an amazing place. They are an amazing resource. Okay, so what do I mean by workplace modifications, though? Let's have a look. Okay, so workplace modifications through Job Access. These are some examples of what they can be used for, okay? So they can be used for making adjustments to the physical workplace. Okay, so if you need to get a new door get a new door installed so that your employee with an impairment can actually get through and access the building, or you need to modify your toilets or cubicles or anything to do with the physical workplace, Job Access can help you with that. You can also use it to make modifications to work vehicles. So if somebody's impairment means that they now require hand controls or everything needs to be able to be driven with one foot, Job Access can help with the costs of those. They can also help with the cost for special equipment for the workplace. Okay, so if you have somebody who has a sight impairment and requires screen readers or requires a braille reader or something similar. Okay, Job Access is the place that you go to. These guys can help with so much. Okay, they can also help with information and communication devices. Okay, Auslan interpretive services, there are certain ones that they will help with there. They will also help with specialist services for employees with specific learning disorders and mental health conditions. Okay, they will also help to fund awareness training for your workplace. Okay, this includes deafness awareness, and I'll get into that later. It's really amazing. They'll also help with mental health awareness and first aid training as well. Okay, so there is so much that you can access through Job Access, and it is an amazing, I want to say force multiplier, but that's not what I'm looking for. Value add. There we are. So Job Access is an amazing value add. Okay, when you employ someone with an impairment. So, what's the application process? Okay, as a note, okay, most disability employment services will facilitate and arrange any assessments that are required and any paperwork that is required. Okay, so if you're going through a disability employment service already for your employees, they will often help to do this. If you want to access this on your own, that's fine, that is your own choice. And this is the process for it. Okay, so first of all, you submit the application to the Employment Assistance Fund via Job Access. Now, they have an online form that is very easy to fill out. They have done an amazing job to do this. This is a very accessible form, and there is a lot of help available there. Okay, so you submit the application to them. They will then assess the application itself. Okay, now, if this application is successful, one of two things will happen. Okay, they will tell you whether you need an assessment or you're not going to need an assessment. Now, if an assessment isn't needed, okay, the workplace is then told to go ahead and purchase the goods and services, and then they will get reimbursed by Job Access for them. Okay, now, if an assessment is required, okay, and this is often for your big ticket items. For example, if you are getting a new electric door put in or a lift or something similar, then they will organise free of charge to the employer, okay, a professional to come out and actually assess the requirement to make sure that you're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Okay, now this assessor that comes out is one of the great value adds if you are a savvy employer. Often it will be an engineer or an occupational therapist or somebody similar who will come out to do this assessment. Now, if you have anything else around the business that needs looking at, bring it up with them whilst they're there. Okay? 9 times out of 10, the assessor is quite happy to talk over any other issues that you may have as well. Okay? That reduces your costs. It reduces you having to pay for a call out of one of your own. Okay? It's a great value add. I really recommend giving it a go. But if the assessment is required, like I said, the Job Access will arrange the specialist to confirm the workplace changes. And if they say yes, okay, yep, it definitely needs doing, it's definitely something that needs to be done, then once again, the workplace purchases the goods and services and you get reimbursed by Job Access. Okay? Brilliant value add. If you do this sensibly, especially with physical workplace changes, you can also help to increase the accessibility for your customers as well. Okay? Savvy businesses can really get a lot of value out of this service. Now, like with all government-funded services, there are caps to the funding, which is fair enough because there is some big ticket items out there. So the first funding cap is physical workplace adjustments. They're capped at $30,000. Okay, so it's still a fair whack of money that they're capped at. Okay, but that is where they're capped at. Now, with the physical workplace adjustments, once again, value add onto it. Okay, once Job Access gives you the go-ahead and you get the builder out, make sure that, or when you're actually getting the quote in the first place, make sure that you get the builder to quote for any other work that needs to be done around the place at the same time. That way, you're reducing your call-out fee. Okay? Just another small value add there. Now, Auslan interpreting. Okay? Various caps depending on what they're used for. So Auslan Level 1 interpreting is for work-related activities for employees who are deaf or have a hearing impairment. And this includes remote interpreting and real-time captioning, okay? Now this is capped at $6,000 for every 12 months. Okay, so if you have... there's so many things that Auslan Level 1 can be used for. Now Auslan Level 2 interpreting is for job interviews and related activities such as site visits, completion of tests and information sessions for people who are deaf and have hearing impairment. Now, the funding for this is uncapped. Okay? So, there's no reason to not interview somebody who uses Auslan as their main method of communication. Okay? The funding is uncapped. If you have somebody apply for the position and explain that they have that issue, job access. Okay? Auslan Level 3, the last one, and this one is my favourite. This is the biggest value add of all of these, I feel. Okay, it's to help co-workers receive training, in this case the Certificate 2 in Auslan, to communicate with employees who are deaf or have a hearing impairment and who use Auslan as their main method of communication. Now this is capped at $855 per 12 months. Now, why I say this is a value add, okay, imagine you send a couple of your frontline employees off to do this so that they can actually help to communicate, with one of their other employees. Now, suddenly, your business offers a very niche service. There are not many businesses out there that have people who can communicate in Auslan. What a value add, okay? To be able to have that. Pretty interesting, isn't it? The last funding cap is the disability awareness training that you can run. Okay, now this is capped at $1,500 per employee with an impairment per year. Okay, now this is another great value add, and little plug for ourselves here, it's something that 30 Foot Drop offers. Okay, something that we can do. The disability awareness training is to actually help people or help the other employees around to actually gain confidence with this new workmate. Now, as an awareness trainer myself, this course is focused on that particular person's impairment. But I find personally that in order to teach that impairment, I have to start off with a much broader range, okay? To make sure that all the employees have a much better understanding. So that means that all your employees will be getting generalised awareness training, which is mostly paid for by Job Access, will increase their skills and their ability to be able to attract this market segment. And as you will see in webinar number 3 and 4, this is quite a large market segment that is currently being very neglected and underserved. Food for thought. Anyway, hopefully you guys have all gotten something out of this today, and that you've enjoyed it. What we're going to do is our open forum session. Now, before we get into it, okay, if you're not going to hang around, I really encourage you guys, please fill in our survey, okay? If you go to www.30footdrop.com.au/live, okay, and scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll find the buttons, the links to the surveys, okay? This is webinar number 1. If you could please go there, it's only a quick six question survey. Any feedback really helps, okay? Now, for those of you who are hanging around, okay, we're going to have a bit of a Q&A time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to head over to www.30footdrop.com.au/live and use the chat box there to ask me any questions, okay? So you're going to have about 5 minutes to put any questions that you got down. And as I said at the beginning of today's webinar, they don't have to be related to what we're discussing today, okay? They can be about anything. So please, head there, ask your questions. I'll give you guys until 5 to 12 to do that. Okay? And at that point, I will answer your questions. Okay? So please head over there and do that. Yeah, I'll answer your questions soon. And we're back. Okay, so time up, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we got here. Okay, looks like we don't have any questions for today. So, look, thank you very much for everybody who has watched today. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Please, as I said, head over to our website and do the survey. If you've enjoyed today, please give us a like. Follow us on any of the social media platforms. Search for 30 Foot Drop. We're on most of them. Give us a rating, a review. These things all really, really help us. And yeah, that is it. So, look, once again, thank you very much for watching. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and we'll catch you next time.